Duress and Egress. Asher. Conclusion. He destroyed the first 100 Vex, then the second. A Minotaur roared into being before him, and he crushed its Radiolarian core in his metal fist. He climbed forward over their clawing limbs. He slipped in the cooling rue of their dead fluid. Asher swallowed a mouthful of blood and kept moving. He paused by a whirling gate and watched the aperiodic waves, then stepped through at the only possible moment. He walked steadily through laser grids that seemed to bend around him. He hung calmly in a gravitational tourbillon as the ground beneath him flickered and shifted madly. And the Vex began to observe. The corridors of the Pyramidion were lined with glowing red eyes. The metal mannequins stood dumbly, twitching, shuddering as Asher passed. A familiar area unfolded before him, a cubist sinkhole reeking with the flat base stench of slate mud and bleach. He looked where the sky should be and found another impossible shape, another fractal contradiction. Far above him, placid in its Penrose vortex, the vast Radiolarian lake lapped gently at the metallic shores. The man reached up to the lake with his metal arm. He then reached with his arm of flesh. He reached with both, and he brought the lake down. Hello everyone, long time no see. My name is Jade, otherwise known as Scarlet Rebel, in case you forgot. And today we're going to be talking about a new mystery quest that just launched in Destiny post Lightfall that is called Avalon. Now, my partner Tristan and I did this quest for the first time a couple of nights ago, as well as cleaning up other quests on Neomuna at the same time. Specifically, we were doing the Cloudstrider Memorial... we were doing the Cloudstrider Memorial quest at the same time. And with everything that we found, there's a lot to talk about. We were talking and theorising for a really long time after we finished both of those quests. A lot of really exciting stuff is happening in Destiny, and I just want to say that it's honestly such a treat to not have everything be so painfully obvious, because there's just this wonderful satisfaction and absolute delight in realising all these connections as you play the game. Honestly, kudos to the narrative team for working so hard this past year on making Lightfall so very good. I'm really impressed with it, so there's my mini review. And I just want to say that I love the direction that Destiny's narrative is taking with Lightfall. Bungie's storytelling style makes it so that we get to kind of live in the twists and the turns that the story takes, and take an immense amount of satisfaction into putting the threads together. It's one of the main things that really pulled me into this game back in the day, and I mean, they've used this method of storytelling the entire time, and we've all loved it. It makes sense that they'd keep doing it with Lightfall, since, so many people have whole careers now based on unravelling these mysteries. Even with the narrative improvements of DLCs like Forsaken and Witch Queen, which, undoubtedly have gone on into Lightfall as well, Bungie still do what they do best, and what we have always responded well to. Anyway, the main thing that I really want to talk about in this video is a theory that I have surrounding the potential returning of certain characters, and how this year of content could potentially involve threads that bring all of our favourite, previously thought lost characters back from the brink of death for the ultimate battle in Final Shape. It's a theory that myself and my partner Tristan, otherwise known as Exordium Noctis, have kind of crafted together, so as per usual, shout out to him for kind of theory crafting with me, and both of us kind of figuring it out together. Obviously, there are spoilers for the Avalon Exotic mission and Lightfall itself ahead. I am going under the assumption that if you're watching this, you've played all of that content, so you have been warned. So let's start with the Avalon mission itself, because this mission basically sets up the base of the theory for many different reasons, kind of ranging from the mission itself and the environmental storytelling to the kind of content and the context of it. So Ashamiya has been seen in the Vex network since Lightfall dropped. Specifically, there's a mission that you can do, I think, once a week from Nimbus called Partition, and it feels like seeing him in the Vex network and that mission itself was setting up for the Avalon mission. Because in the Partition mission, I love saying that, we saw him constantly, and then in the Avalon mission, he actually popped up on the radar as a friendly. We saw him a lot more frequently in Avalon than we did in Partition. In Partition, it was a lot of people trying to catch him, and you could sparrow a lot in that mission, so you would kind of jump up onto things to try and catch him and things like that, whereas in Avalon, you'd see him a lot more frequently. It's very obvious that he is the one asking us to do this mission to defeat this Vex mind to take this sword. After myself and Tristan unlocked the Hall of Heroes in the Lightfall campaign, Tristan overheard Quinn being the archivist in Neomuna. She mentioned a code that repeated the word assistant over and over, and I think she says something to the tune of, and who even is Mia? And I remember that making Tristan freak out a lot. So again, he's been teased a lot, and if that wasn't enough to hint that we're most likely going to be dragging him out of the Vex network sometime soon, the mission itself solidified it. And in particularly this line where Misrax talks about how much pain he has to be in and how we absolutely need to help him.
Guardian, this voice in the system, when it speaks, I sense a heart hunger, a great yearning. But there is also incredible pain, suffering deeper than I thought possible. We should do all we can to help.
Now, here kind of comes the crux of the theory, because the final boss battle is against Brachion, who, if you haven't played base Destiny 2, if you never went onto IO or anything like that, if you played like post Beyond Light, Brachion was a strike boss and one who kind of the reason Asher lost his arm, and the reason why Asher has a metal arm is because Asher and his fire team went in to try and kill Brachion. Asher lost his fire team, lost his arm, technically lost his ghost too. So the final boss battle is Brachion, which is incredibly funny, and I think it's very serendipitous because this Brachion has been specifically reprogrammed to hunt Asher himself. The Vex hate him as much as he hates them, and it's absolutely hilarious, and obviously Brachion being included here was done very, very well. I enjoyed it a lot. So, again, this is something that my partner Tristan pointed out, but the 3 levels of Brachion's fight, it could be argued, mirror different areas of Vex influence that are connected to the characters that have been or are currently trapped by the Vex. So the first is, of course, the Pyramidion and our favourite cranky Vex dad Asher. Bullshit shifting cover walls included, it looks exactly like that part of the strike at the very, very end. The second could be the Pyramidion still, I will admit. However, it could also be the arena in which we saved Saint 14 back in Season of the Dawn. There was a Hydra there behind a wall in the same way Brachion is in the Avalon mission. I'm not 100% certain about this, but what I will say is that I think that Brachion was also hiding behind a wall in the strike. I'll have to go back and check, but if not, it's much more compelling that this is a parallel to the arena that we had to free Saint in. And lastly, we have, of course, the Vault of Glass, which can only mean one person, Praedith. Again, I will admit that the layout here could be considered ambiguous, especially with the sort of waterfalls of Radiolaria. However, if you're looking at it from below, with the triangle middle and the clear distinction between left and right, I don't think it's too abrasive of a theory. I think the connections are there. You know, my arm doesn't hurt from stretching too much. I'm just kind of gently caressing the theory. The thing is, why go through all the trouble to make them distinctly different if it wasn't for a reason? They could have done, you know, Brachion's final fight the same way as it was in the strike and just make it super hard and it would be fine, or they could do 3 levels of Brachion's strike, or they could make each one of them incredibly different, but they didn't do that. I've always said that Bungie are fantastic at environmental storytelling, obvious even in the final mission of Lightfall when you find the Veil in an old Ishtar Collective building. Since we know that the Ishtar Collective was a Golden Age company dedicated to research, the building itself shows that much time has passed since the Veil was actively researched, making it apparent that knowledge on the Veil wouldn't rest with the Cloud Striders, but in Neomuna's extensive history since they've been alive post-collapse for just as long as we have, and we don't even know the ins and outs of our own history, so why would we expect answers on what the Veil is straight away when this civilization clearly has its priority on protecting its people? They're in the middle of an active war right now. We didn't know what the Iron Lords were for the longest time, we didn't know anything about the Dark Ages, and that was okay, but for some reason, it's not okay that this one thing hasn't been explained, like we're all 5-year-olds in math class, when we all know that Bungie have a year worth of storytelling ahead of them, and it's not like the story was as bad as base Destiny 1, and honestly, can we all just admit that there's a lot of entitlement in the community right now, and that the reason Lightfall is being review bombed as hard as it is because some people decided that all of Destiny's storytelling is obsolete, because they don't know what this one thing is, when Bungie have always utilised a mystery storytelling method, one that has allowed people to make countless videos and even careers from its narrative? I mean, anyway, it's compelling, is all. So moving away slightly from the Avalon mission itself and kind of talking about, other things that have happened in Destiny and, even in Lightfall, even not in Lightfall, that are kind of supporting this theory, it's worth mentioning that Praedyth has been mentioned and his return has been teased throughout Destiny 2, even having a very, very close moment in the Aspects lore book that came out during Season of Undying. He very, very nearly escaped the vault, actually with the aid of Maya Sundaresh, Chioma Essie, and others that were founders of the Ishtar Collective. So that's all connected. The Ishtar Collective founded Neo Muna. The founders know who Praedyth is. They know he's trapped in the vault. There's possibility there. A lot of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey possibility, but possibility nonetheless. On top of that, myself and Tristan also finished the Winterbite Exotic Quest, which is the one for the Fallen Cloud Striders, and we promptly lost our minds at this final message, because it was one of those things that again made everything connect together, particularly this part of this final message that says, "Urgent. Saturn 6 contains vital information. Enemy of the Witness on Titan if still living. Preservation paramount. Do not waste time." So this message comes from a Vex being known as the Occlusion that lives within the Cloud Arc. The Winterbite Exotic mission tells us that the first Cloud Strider protected this being, and we then protected them for this quest, hence the information being given to us in gratitude because we protected the Occlusion essentially. So who or what is on Titan? Well, Deputy Commander Salone for one. She's probably the person that a lot of people's mind would jump to straight away, especially if we're talking about Asher, who was also the NPC on one of the planets that disappeared. If you did play around about Beyond Light or before Beyond Light, the season before Beyond Light came out was called Season of Arrivals. We lost Io, Mercury, Mars, and Titan. Asher being the NPC for Io and Sloane being the NPC for Titan. So she is who everyone kind of thinks of when you talk about someone or something returning from Titan. However, I'm not dunking on Sloane. I'm really, really not. She's awesome, she's badass, but unless she's become like a hulking behemoth, like otherworldly entity, I don't think she's going to count as an enemy of the Witness with the kind of gravitas that the Occlusion is talking about. I could be proved completely wrong there, and that's totally fine. But if Titan returns, she'll naturally return as well, at least I hope she will, so that's really exciting. So then why talk about Titan if I'm not too excited about Sloane returning? Well, Sloane returning is going to kind of prove this friends being, brought back over the next sort of year or so post Lightfall. So if she returns and Titan returns, that kind of feeds it into that possibility. And just as a side note, I think the enemy on Titan is the Leviathan, which will turn out to be a worm god, because we learnt from Vow of the Disciple that there are other sects of worm gods that aren't like the main ones. We learnt that there are other kinds of worms that aren't like Zol and Akka and the other kind of like big ones that the Hive siblings fought. And I know for the longest time people said that Leviathan on Titan wasn't a worm god, but I think it's very, very apparent that it could potentially turn out to be. Or maybe some kind of, really important alien from another planet that the Witness destroyed or Rogue destroyed. Again, possibility. The Witness seems heavily uninterested in the Hive, and it would make sense that the worm god would be an enemy to the Witness, especially considering one of its brethren was being used to power Roke's death machine. I'd be really mad about that too. And then last but not least, as a kind of, here's another thing that could connect into all of it. Look, this may seem like it's not connected at all, and it may seem like wish fulfillment at this point, especially considering I made a video that had a whole section about this, but god damn it, man. We've been talking about Sher Ido returning for years, and the promotional art for this season, for Season of Defiance, had so many of us screeching for Sher to come back, and honestly, it may not be as obvious as Saints was, but it feels like it's being set up. Mara's pushing herself with this spell to help us, and Sher Ido may be the only one to be able to talk her down, because they're in love, because they knew each other so well. Sher may pop herself out of the Ascendant Realm, to save her girlfriend, and to be like, what are you doing? You can't keep this up. Sher's talked about returning in so many different bits of lore. If you're curious about that, if you haven't heard about that before, I will link my video about Mara and Sher and burying your gaze, and there is a section in there towards the end that talks about the possibility of Sher returning. The pyramid that's in the background of the promotional image as well is kind of the thing that a lot of us lore people kind of honed in on, because there's a lore card for a rocket launcher that came out during Forsaken, where Cher talks about how she had a dream that she saw Mara split a pyramid with her bare hands. So yeah, Cher Ido I do think counts as a kind of potential in this theory if we are having all of these friends and comrades who have all of this power that could help us return. But we've got Asher Mia, who's being heavily hinted at. We've got the potential for Praedith. We got Saint 14 back and, you know, we're having throwback references to him. And then we have Sloane, and we have something on Titan that could quote unquote return but also help. And then Cher Ido, who again, heavily hinted, we don't have confirmation on that. All very exciting, and it all feels like it's just right there within reach. So in conclusion, and kind of ultimately, I can honestly say that I think that this year of content could potentially revolve around the finding of our scattered friends and potential allies, all of which could have information and knowledge and power that could help in our final fight against the Witness. You know, they've all been scattered around for a long time, they've probably learned things and have powers that could really help us out, and retrieving all of those people, even if it ends up being, I don't want to say a subplot, but even if it ends up being not as focal as Saint's return was, it could definitely still be there, and it could definitely be something that again will help us in that final fight. And I mean, you know, if that does end up being the case, like, thank God, right, that they added in the final shape so that Lightfall could strategically and intelligently let the narrative breathe over this year of storytelling. I can't imagine the way people would complain about how bloated the story was if they tried to add all that they have planned into just one DLC. Can you imagine how much people would complain about that? Anyway, I really enjoyed Lightfall, and I'm really excited for the next year of content, and I hope you all have a wonderful, safe, amazing day. There will be new videos soon. I love you all very much. Bye bye.